So welcome to what I think is our 25th running of the CommonGear.com podcast. This is Jeff Lavery, joined by Jonathan Grabowski. Our third partner in crime, Lars Way, is out of commission this week with an early morning flight departure tomorrow. So we will bring him into the next one. But as you know, we get together most weeks to talk about some notable sales in the digital auction world of Bring a Trailer, Cars and Bids, and occasionally some others as they work their way into the rotation. But every week there's a theme, and this week's theme is yellow sports cars. So yellow is one of those colors that we all know is sort of wrapped up in the identity of high-powered performance cars, and but also less than high-powered economy cars. And so yellow really has this sort of wide spectrum of desirability. But in the case of sports cars and muscle cars, it's generally one of the more sought after shades. That could be speed yellow, that could be competition yellow, that could be Dakar yellow. There's so many different varieties. But this week we're looking at three cars that really actually all have different shades of yellow. So this is pretty cool, we think, and really underscores how color choice can make a big difference when it comes to the value of a car. So, John, what's your favorite yellow as it relates to performance cars?
I mean, geez, I would go with the kind of that fly yellow you would see on, Porsche 993s. I would go with.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that
that
that,
was
that
a
kind of, that's kind of, if you think of iconic yellow, I would say that's kind of the 993 Porsche yellow.
yeah a 993 Turbo S in fly yellow is pretty much as good as it gets for me. I would
Yeah,
agree as well. But
yeah. I mean, but if I'm now, you got me racing my brain. So going back to the 964, I think, no, it wasn't, it was, the 80s era rough, 911 cars, that
oh, the
that famous,
BTR.
yeah, the GT, the famous Nürburgring video. So now you got my mind racing with, yellow, great legendary performance cars right now, but it's still
Yeah,
kind of a Porsche in the concept set.
yeah, and it's interesting to think about too when like that really became a thing, right? Like yellow cars were not always
Mm.
around, and then and it always seemed to be that the performance models really just everything, make it as loud as you can, right? Why not just you're going from one extreme to another? Why not have the paint code be the same? So this first one is a 2022 911 GT3, already just an epic car, and it's a shade that was new to me, Bahama Yellow. And I got to say, this is a little bit orangier than the fly yellow, but it's absolutely gorgeous, especially with those gunmetal gray wheels, the red brake calipers. Just a very attractive car. And so, GT3 now, it's a monster of a machine. It's with the PDK transmission, obviously absolutely bonkers performance out of the gate, center lock wheels, uh those seats, which are just works of art, and our full carbon fiber seats. This is, even without the paint job, this would be an absolute object of desire. And this one, I didn't see, this is 72 miles, so basically an as new car. And listen, we talked about the GT whatever models on here plenty of times. This is just, to me, even with the higher level of automation in the cockpit, this is still such a sweet 911. It's such a sweet version of the 911, because basically Porsche's engineers are throwing everything but the kitchen sink and the kitchen sink at this thing. And so in many ways, I kind of feel like the GT3, even as much as this model changes, kind of always has a little bit of the essence of, to go back to the where it started, the yellow bird, right? Just that, like, off the chain. Let's just make it as nuts as we can while still having it maintain all the composure that a 911 is known for. So, price wise, I actually thought this was probably a decent price for a car that's hard to find and will probably always appreciate because of how novel that color is. What were your thoughts? How did this car strike you?
I've always been a huge fan of GT3 911s. I think my wife asked me maybe like 2 weeks ago, like, you could have any car, what would it be? And I said, 911 GT3, because it's not a bonkers supercar, but it's there. I mean, I love kind of homologation, race car for the road type cars, and the 911 GT3 is one of them. The color is interesting. It looks very kind of papaya orange McLaren-esque.
Oh, good
when
reference.
I was looking, I'm like going, this isn't your normal, kind of yellow. What looks so it's well, I like it a lot. It's a real kind of grower on you. At first it's like, okay, let me take it back, but it's a real grower. 72 miles in this car. This is a collector's piece. It's got all the bells and whistles, the PDK. It's got all the dynamic stuff. It's really great vehicle. What's interesting too is if you look at what 911 GT3s are going for, the touring models seem to kind of go for higher prices compared to and the touring models kind of have they're a little more reserved looking, maybe a little more old school in a singerish sort of way. They don't have the big wing in the back, so it's interesting that the touring versions kind of go for more money. But I'd love to know how many cars came in this color. I wonder if this is like one of those rare Porsche special, works type thing. For the price,
right, like a special wish, special wishes car, something that was supposed to work.
Is it a special works car? So it's $199 on the original 2022 sticker. This car goes for $250. I think this is what we expect. Well,
look at this first comment too. Like basically that is saying the market has shifted so much that this guy is saying I'd say it's a little bought considering the same car cost $20,000 more. Now, like every model year of a GT3, it's crazy how much exponentially more expensive it gets. So I get it's mind blowing to think that you're saving money at this point by paying for this.
Yeah, it really is, and it just shows kind of the value of these cars. It really shows, when you talk to a normal person about cars, you talk about how much they depreciate. They're depreciating assets. They're a bad investment. We're talking about cars, especially cars like GT3s that are investments. Investment vehicles, even if they're not like I would like to call investment grade or investment quality. There's always going to be a market for these cars.
Yeah, there is. I do. It's so hard. It's so hard for me these days to know when we talk about investments. Like, was this too much money? Was it right on the market? Was it and this is where the color choice really factors in, because you're saying if you're someone who wanted one of these, then you're just thinking like maybe you called your dealer and you already know how long the wait time is for a Bahama Yellow anything from Porsche. And you're just thinking, if I want this color, I'm fixated on it. I don't care what the price tag is. This is just I want it now. And so, as far as it maybe being too much money, it probably looks like too much money now to some people, but I don't know. There has been so much chatter about everything from housing to automobiles like that. Like, oh well, no, next month the price is going to go down. Next month the price is going to go down, and I'm just like, I could see that happening for like people who are buying subpar cars that shouldn't be buying them, or houses, whatever. Insert example here. But for truly desirable models, truly desirable neighborhoods, whatever it is, I don't think the price is
always going to be a market.
So, yeah, exactly.
So while you're talking, I just looked. So back in January, another a signal yellow, 2022 911 GT3, which is a similar, which I believe it's a close to similar color. That went for 261K, and that had 708 miles. So,
when was that? What was that? What was the year?
It was a 2022 911 GT3. It was sold for 261. It's a similar looking color if you scroll down to the bottom.
Look at that signal,
yeah, which looks in that photo looks very similar.
It's very similar. I could see it. Oh, you know what it is? It has less orange in it. It's definitely closer to like the fly yellow. This is
closer to the fly yellow.
The lighting is kind of crappy in these photos. Yeah, so you see it here way brighter. Which in terms of the price paid here, this could be a little bit when things were a little bit frothier, January 23, or it could be that someone
it's
like
$11,000 difference.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if the color, then you get into the whole the yellow, the shades of yellow, right? Was that a factor here? Or again, was it just, 10,000 swing for someone buying a car at this level really doesn't matter. And it's just, again, I wanted one right now and it's available and it's sitting there. But in any case, so there's our first yellow car out of the gate. GT3 is always going to be desirable. It's always going to be an item, no matter what generation
you're never
it
going to
is.
go wrong with one of them.
You're not.
You're never gonna see like a GT3 market tank or something like that. You're always
Not
gonna,
at all.
I think, see it go up and up and up and up and up.
Let's move on to our next yellow car, which is a much different kettle of fish, if you will. And this is a 2005 Ram SRT-10, 812 original miles in yellow fever edition, which I'm assuming is the name of the color as well. Oh no, solar yellow over medium slate gray. So yellow fever edition, solar yellow paint. This is, one of my favorite trucks ever made. I've been a big fan of the Ram, performance versions for some time. They had the one with the Viper, like the Viper blue with the white stripe, I think with an SST, had 2-piece 5-spoke wheels. It kind of had the looks, had, I think, just more subtle upgrades as far as exhaust intake, things like that. But I mean, this truck was just, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Chrysler, I mean, I still think the build quality of their products is fairly subpar, but I have to give them credit that when it comes to making absolutely bonkers performance editions, they really just don't care. They don't really care what you think. They don't care if it's, if they're going to sell a ton of them. I mean, the nonsense they produce sometimes is just, it's staggering. So yes, to see the 8.3 liter V10 stuffed under the hood of a Ram, short box, single cab pickup, was just, it's absolutely nutty. And I mean, I love how tall that gear shifter is. And, it's a true 6-speed manual. It's got limited slip. It checks all the boxes. But here's the thing about these trucks. I mean, you talk about the demographics of people who are buying things based on things like color scheme. And the GT3 buyer, I get, because they're looking at the fact that Porsche produces a very small number of cars every year in those unique colors. Just, when I see this, I wonder if the color even mattered as much as someone just wanting an 812 mile SRT-10, because you tend to find the high performance Mopar stuff, if it's not been like just kept under, like in a car, a car bubble, they tend to get kind of used, right? And they really lose that veneer of being new very quickly. And having lived with a Mopar product for a few months from this era, as I mentioned before, I was just shocked by how abysmal the build quality was on a truck with a little over 100K on it. So I could see, a couple of things working in this truck's favor, but I wonder if it was more just knowing how hard it is to find a high performance Dodge product that isn't like, 6-figure Viper, still in sort of minty in the wrapper condition. But I am really left conflicted if I would still pony up 65 grand for one of these. How do these strike you?
You hit the nail on the head with this, Jeff. Just kind of scanning what has been going on recently with the sales for these. This is the high watermark, because you're seeing a lot of them go for 30 or so, or even you see some dip into like under 20 at this point, depending on what it is. So I think the combination of it being straight up being an under 1,000 mile vehicle for these things is, I think that's what made it go for $64,000. It's a bubble car that you kind of mentioned, and we talked about Mopar cars in the past here on this podcast, where the market for them is very Mopar people, and they kind of do their own thing. They're really into the Mopar product. They'll buy and purchase and collect several Mopar things. And this being so rare and unique that, of course, this is going to go for a higher number because, you're seeing other ones out there for 21,000 miles, even 8,000 miles go for a lot less. So I think the rarity factor kind of, and if you talked about kind of the build quality, that's kind of the knock on the Mopar products this era is the build quality. So to get something that's pretty much brand new is, if you're a collector, if you're a Mopar person, you're going to scoop this up. So that's right. That's where I stand on it right now.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing: as much as we talk about yellow working in the favor of a car like the 911, I kind of feel like it works against this truck a little bit.
Really?
Not because, well, it didn't affect the sale price, right? Phenomenal number, but that was more the mileage driving that than anything else. But I don't know. I feel like the quintessential high performance Mopar products have overwhelmingly been red or blue. So it's a little bit of and here's the other thing is that they
I'll disagree with that because when I think of the Mopar of the Rams from this era, I think of the Rumblebee, which was that yellow Ram, and it had the kind of the black trim. So I kind of think like Rumblebee. So it doesn't. So I'm not turned off by the yellow on this one.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, that's true. It's just they have embraced it more than maybe some of the other domestic brands have. But this is what kills me is that interior shot where it's like, couldn't they just not put yellow plastic trim on the doors? Like, couldn't they just stop themselves from doing that a little bit?
That's all. I think that's a knock is that with it's special on the outside and inside the engine and internals, but on the interior it's a pretty
you're still well, and even look at, I mean, and this is just, again, I'm not trying to knock domestic products by any means. Not, I mean, obviously this is, I am a little bit, but I guess this is what still kills me as far as like being okay with this is look at I mean, just look at the gap between, I mean, it's like I can't get over the fact that it's a brand new truck and it has those gaps on it. Like, just I don't know, it's always stunning to me when I see something like this.
It's
and just
they were selling oodles of these to everyone, so it's I think they weren't concerned like people are going to buy these. The Ram, look how popular the Ram got when it went through that kind of big rig redesign back in '94, and then with this generation, it continued, because it was a very different, unique looking truck. And then we're like, hey, let's throw a Viper V10 in it.
Yeah, right.
It's something bonkers, and they didn't really. It was the focus was on the Viper V10 motor. It wasn't like, hey, let's focus on the other aspects of this vehicle. Let's just throw it in. We'll sell a bunch, and people will love it.
And I guess, and that's what always, why people like me always get drawn back to the European stuff is because, Porsche will do that. And then they'll also give you the suede headliner, right? And the carbon fiber trim, and Dodge is just going to paint some stuff yellow and throw it on the dash. Like,
it is. Yeah. I mean, that photo right there is very kind of like cheesy aftermarket.
Oh my God. It's
very, very cheesy aftermarket. Hey, we're going to throw some plastic trim pieces on.
Like, make it carbon fiber. Just put carbon fiber trim in the performance vehicle. And
I mean, they're counting beans of that. It's more of the bean counting that point. It's how can we get maximum dollar for?
Yeah, it is. But hey, good for the seller. This seller is 911R on Bring a Trailer, and kudos to him or her, whoever it is. They have built themselves a very nice consignment business where their presentation just gets them the best and the lowest mileage versions of pretty much anything. So another great result for that seller. Let's take a look at our final car. This is on Cars and Bids, 2006 Ford GT, speed yellow. Great name for a yellow car, 6,600 miles. This one I paid attention to because Doug DeVero is the GT owner, and he talked about this one a lot because it's a 4-option car, which I didn't really know,
Yeah,
like,
define. Yeah, what is a four option car?
well, I'm still trying to figure it out. I think it's because, um, I'm guessing it's because there just weren't a whole lot of options to begin with. So this car has all of the, more of the available limited features that you could get. And I'm trying to figure out what those things are, because he talks about, or this listing talks about, the staggered BBS wheels, racing stripes, leather carbon fiber seats, and a Macintosh CD player. Which those four things strike me as, like, I know those wheels were not standard, and then racing stripes, obviously those were not standard. You could, yes, you could
All
spec
right,
those.
so
And
so
then I'm guessing too, leather, maybe you could have opted for like a carbon, like an Alcantara. And certainly, I don't know if carbon fiber seats were standard. Then, last but not least, the Macintosh CD player. Macintosh is usually a significant upgrade for everything from a Subaru to obviously one of these. So I'm guessing that
so
those
I
are the
I
things.
just I just looked it up, and
Yeah.
according to it, the four options are stripes, red brake calipers, BBS wheels, and the Macintosh stereo.
Okay, there we go. So I wonder, at this say if this the modifications. Yeah, so that's why that didn't stand out. So the dealer painted the calipers, which was kind of dumb, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. Like, if the red calipers were the factory option, painting yellow was really kind of silly to do. And honestly, that's such a dealer thing to do, right? They'd be like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this will be great if we're gonna do this, we're gonna make it even more color coordinated. It's like, yeah, well, you actually just he just stripped away one of the key original features that denoted the four option car. But anyway, all that aside, uh, almost 400,000, 6,600 miles. I love, I guess we're calling it the first generation Ford GT,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like when the retro craze was happening, like everybody was just kind of recreating the original. I feel like this was one of the best manifestations of that concept of bringing back a classic. Like, I mean, you see it and you're like, oh yeah, this is a homage to the GT40, but at the same time, it's still so modern looking and still comfortable. And, like, they erased all the demons that would, you would think associate with the original Ford GT. I really loved it, because I also thought, a lot of cars, especially supercars, they've kind of been, in some way or another, they get replicated, right? The
Mm-hmm.
basic silhouette. I don't think there's ever been a car like the GT40, like, since it was made. Like, that was the coolest thing about these, that, like, this the reincarnation of the GT40 was the closest thing to ever come to the original GT40. So I think these are just phenomenal cars. DeMuro goes on and on about his being one of the best driving cars he's ever owned. And again, my personal barometer is when a car, like, becomes a used car and the price barely fluctuates. That's a pretty good sign it's going to be a very collectible model down the line. So yeah, you could have paid another 100 grand for this car. I probably wouldn't have even batted an eye, because I just like it. I love them so much. I don't know if this would, given your alliances to GM, if this one would be if you consider it a sin to anything I just said. But what are
No,
your
no,
thoughts
I
on
don't, because GM never did anything like this. I mean, that
it?
if they,
Right.
this it was an icon. It's an iconic car. The original Ford GT40 back in the '60s, iconic car, and kuda and we talked about. I think we had a GT maybe a couple months ago, and we talked about how at this time Ford styling was hitting home run after home run after home run, and
Right.
you talk about how we kind of revive cars, revive models. They kept it so true to form. That's what I love about this car, is how authentic it looks. It's not influenced by the Ford GT. It is a Ford GT. It's if you were, it's kind of what they do with like the nine. It's kind of what Porsche does with 911. If you were to you know go into the future, and what would a Ford GT look like, that this is what it would look like.
Yep.
I don't know if I would pay $900,000, Jeff, for it.
Yeah.
That's I was just kind of I was just skimming around, and this is kind of the mark of where these cars kind of sit price wise, in that upper threes, lower fours. So,
Right.
so it's, I mean, it's the yellow. I would get one in red if it was me. The yellow's not my favorite colors. I'd say the red, or maybe one more heritage type things with like the Gulf
Yeah.
colors of the blue and orange. But this is a good deal. We're not gonna be here 10 years doing this podcast and see this car, and someone's gonna the seller's taking a complete bath on it.
No.
It's gonna kind of stay in that upper threes, lower fours, most likely. What I'm interested in is, I know when they brought back the GT a couple of years ago, I wonder what it did for the values of these cars, because I was not thrilled with the 2019 GT. I thought it was oh, what are you doing with this thing? It's like it was like a really bad evolution that, it's influenced by the Ford GT, but it's not. Whereas this is clearly true to form. So
and I think the market has kind of spoken. I mean, it's not to say that the new one isn't selling for great money. It's just that it's kind of like people are like, yeah, well, they're whatever about it, right? They're just like, yeah, okay, I'll
but
buy it.
it's like whereas this was like, they made it to like an over the top supercar, is what
They
they
did.
did with the 2019. Whereas this was the evolution of the GT from the 60s, which it's not, it's a supercar, but it's not a supercar in that sense, where we talk about it's the equivalent of, Ferrari, F430, something like that, not like a LaFerrari, something like that. Whereas like the Ford GT of 2019 was more like a LaFerrari, whereas this was
Right.
kind of more of the mid-level supercar, let's call it. So, um, big
Yeah,
fan of it.
that's a great point.
Big fan
Yeah.
of it. I really, I know I'm a GM guy, but the Ford GT is a great car.
I would venture to say, even though it's a fact that if it's already been marred by the dealers, I know it's a factory option, but I'd love to see this with the stripes deleted.
Hmm.
I don't know if I feel like that's probably sacrilege that you have to have the stripes.
I think it is. I mean, because a lot of those cars did have. I mean, a
Yeah,
good chunk of them did have stripes. Not every one from the '60s had stripes, but this, what an iconic design too. I mean, that's what makes. I think that's what makes the GT what is. It's such a beautiful, iconic design, and they, as I mentioned earlier, they did such a great job keeping it true to form with this car.
they did. They did. Yeah, and I will say, yeah, I need to check myself. Yeah, an extra 100,000. I probably wouldn't do that, but I do think um, the price paid here, to your point, was on the money. There's nothing wrong with spending that kind of change on one of these. Comments. Let's see. Everybody seems pretty okay with
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah,
That this is where it should be.
yeah.
So yeah, terrific
It's
result.
always an interesting thing seeing comments in there, but in usually you get a lot. Usually, as you know, Jeff, there's always a lot of debate, a lot of argument, or what the heck.
Right,
But this is, everyone's like, yeah, solid, good deal, yeah, nice
right.
job.
Yeah. And it's not Cars and Bids, I will give them credit. Like their audience at this point, I think their audience is still evolving, and they're clearly getting some of these more high-end cars, and that
Mhm.
really is a goal.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I think someone wrote this is like the one of the top five.
Yeah, top 10
Yeah,
most expensive cars sold. So it's nice to see like something like this where it's it feels a little more like the early days of BAT, where there's just a camaraderie here that
mm,
is, it's reasonable number. It's not an insane number.
yeah,
And so it feels like it's just a more market correct result. And yeah, I hope they can kind of strike a balance in terms of like getting cars like these, but not
mm,
becoming so over the top, just venture capital money
yeah,
buyers, right? Like that they're only, servicing those types of clients. So,
yeah,
and I don't think they will. I think they've got too much of
yeah,
their bases wrapped up in those, more affordable 90s cars. But
yeah. And
it's cool to see them evolving and getting some of these higher end models.
yeah, and we've talked about this, how like other sites have kind of lost their way, where
Right.
the name of the site doesn't fit the type of cars on the site. Whereas I think with the Doug DeMuro type cars and bits things, he was always known for kind of weird outside the box, cars that that people could afford. Occasionally he would do something ridiculous like like a Ford GT or something like that, but it was always kind of the funky, weird, outside the box, scratch your head sort of stuff. And is hopefully that kind of mantra stays.
Right. So John, out of these three, which one are you taking home?
911 GT3.
Yeah, same here. That's I like this car. I can back this one. I mean, and honestly, you compare this to the GT, and I'm kind of like, I think the GT3 makes a lot more sense.
I just have a spot for 911 GT3, so like it could have been in, I don't know, a lot of other colors, and I still would have probably voted 911 GT3, Jeff. So,
oh yeah,
but it's the icon. It's the iconic vehicle. It may not be the top of the line 911, but it's kind of the 911 that I think everyone kind of turns to and looks at. And if you were to say what's a 911, you would say a 911 GT3.
100%. I'm with you there. So, great conversation as always. Thank you, John, and thank you all for watching. This has been the CommonGear.com podcast, where we look at an interesting segment of vehicle that have sold in the recent past on the premier digital auction sites. And remember to visit the CommonGear.com for all of your vehicle documentation needs. If you are looking to net yourself an average of 10 to 20% more when it comes time to selling your unique collector, vintage, modern, classic car, having a robust digital paper trail of the maintenance and improvements you have made to that car is essential for driving that maximum sale price. So visit thecommongear.com, create a free account today, and begin scanning and storing all of your records and photographs that pay tribute to the incredible work you're doing on a particular vehicle to drive a higher sale price when it comes time to sell. So thanks again for watching. We will hopefully be back here next week, and we'll have another curious, interesting, novel roundup of collector and vintage cars that tell the story about where the market is heading. So thanks for watching. See you next week.